What's up, y'all? TBrown31 here, back with JaboctheGreat. And once again, we have another episode of the Last Word podcast. Finally, it's football season. As you can see by the title of the video, we're starting with college football. Some of the biggest headlines coming from week one, heading into week two as it starts today, Thursday night. Pretty much what everybody's talking about, though. The ACC, a lot of big names, going down, having some troubles. Biggest one, Florida State. Now, I don't know about you, man, but have we ever seen a team lose as a top 10 team twice in week one? I just don't really remember it. I mean, it's bad for Florida State right now.
It is really bad. They're the first team in history to be 17th place in the ACC. There's more teams in the ACC now with the additions of SMU and Stanford and California, I think, is the third one. They'll play actually California and SMU back to back. So they're the first team to be 17th place. That was a joke made when they lost to Georgia Tech. I think people kind of forgot about it, right? You go to Ireland, you're tied up 21-21, and then which you shouldn't be, and then you lose on a field goal. And it's like, all right, well, you're going to drop, but maybe it's not completely over. You scored 21 points. Your defense just couldn't quite do anything, and your offense was a little shaky, but surely against Boston College, that changes.
Right.
That would be incorrect. Boston rolled them for sure. It took Florida forever to even find the end zone. And when they found it, the team might have found it. But DJ Uiagalelei, former Clemson quarterback who had defended it at some parts of his Clemson career, could not find the end zone himself. Overthrowing corners. What DJ has is a cannon and nothing else. Cannon of an arm, no accuracy, no thought, no drive, no motivation. Just throw ball in there. The pick he threw was just because he lobbed it to nowhere. Sometimes, it's like, you could throw the ball away by throwing it outside, or you could throw the ball away by throwing it straight down the middle of the field to the other team. Both work. One of them you just lose possession. So, Florida State defense also is a major problem. They got ran all over by Boston College. Is something that, as a Clemson fan, which we have our own issues that we'll get to in a few segments here. If Boston College can run over Florida State like that, then maybe with Phil Maffa, the Florida State game won't be as scary as it might have been preseason. So I don't know what it is. They retained most of their defense. I'm not sure why their defense is falling completely apart. They added DJ, who had a good time at Oregon State. Not so much so far at Florida State. Maybe they'll bring in their backup and try to get it back on track. But yeah, Florida State 0-2 on week one is a pretty easy way to fall out of the top 25, which they do. They went from number 10 to nothing, and they actually got 0 votes to be in the top 25, which is pretty crazy. That not even one guy was like, we can give them. Well, maybe they should stay at like 25th. There's politics. They made a lot of people mad with the suing of the conferences and whatnot when they had their we should be in the playoffs last year, and we stuck up. Terrence and I put our cord in the hat for FSU, but we won't have to do that at the end of the season. Started 0-2 on week one. Florida State fans, you will not be seeing the playoffs.
Yeah, man, and even with a 12-team playoff, you lose 2 in week one. I know technically week 0 we call it that first weekend when nobody's really playing, but you lose 2 games just straight up like that. To 2 unranked teams, but 2 teams that could be good this year. As a number 10 team, even if you're not as good as you were last year, losing Jordan Travis, replacing him with somebody you think is at least a serviceable quarterback in DJ. Yeah, you really don't have any. There's no reason to be thinking about playoffs. Playoffs. Try to win a game. All right. So maybe they can win. Next week once they get more into ACC competition. And hey, maybe that was their mistake. Starting out with 2 ACC games instead of cupcakes like pretty much everybody else does. And speaking of cupcakes, I don't want to disrespect Florida, but they look like a cupcake against Miami. The game started out like it started out clean. It was 7-3, like it wasn't nothing crazy. And then second quarter on, Miami just absolutely destroyed Florida. It was just like that. Yeah, especially second quarter, they put up 17, 14 in the third. So, it was ridiculous. Cam Ward, he looks really good for Miami. Now, there are a couple times where he makes some stupid passes, and commentators, they were like talking about is like the one thing you don't do as a quarterback, throw across your body going across the field. He did it a couple times. One time was a pick, but besides that, he's really talented. And we talked about this before the video. You had the Miami players talking to the Florida recruits out there because it is down in the swamp. To me, that's embarrassing. Florida, they got to get back next time they play. But right now, I guess we didn't really expect that much from Florida in the first place. I think it's just kind of hyped up because it's the first weekend. In-state rivals, obviously, Florida's still a big brand, SEC, ACC. But, I mean, for the most part, I mean, you can tell once the second quarter got started, this was not even – these two teams really weren't comparable.
Yeah, I think that, like, Florida, was not expected to win this game. But in the first quarter, it looked like, all right, well, there's some competitiveness. It's gritty. It's 7-3. There's room to fight back. And then I think from after that, I think if you were to Google alligator caught in a hurricane, I think that this would be the result. It just didn't go well. I mean, they scored twice, which is more than I can say for the next game we'll get to. But the Hurricanes definitely took them out. And then they took them out in football, and they took them out in spirit to go over and talk to their recruits and say, like, hey, don't go here. Transfer to Miami. It's like, ouch. Like, I don't know. I don't really know what you can do about that when you just lost 41-17 at home. But Florida, certainly not supposed to win this game. But it's not the way you want to start your season with a destruction at the hands of an in-state rival. It's just like, all right, well, that's a pretty low point to start from. So, as Terrence said, maybe Florida State should have scheduled themselves against some cupcakes to start the season, get a little rhythm with a new quarterback and everything. Maybe so should have Clemson. Clemson and Georgia play each other. I am a Clemson student. I'm a grad student. I've been here for 6 years, and it has been 6 years of misery. I started at Clemson right after we won the national championship. We ain't done much else since. So we play against Georgia, and it's what, like 6-3 or 6-0 at halftime.
Nothing.
It's like, all right, okay, our defense is here. This is kind of what we knew would be happening, right? The defense is going to be kind of the only thing we have going for us in this one. Maybe the offense can light up, or maybe at the very least we can lose fashionably, and we'll go in and not drop too far. Instead, in the second half, the offense still can't get it going, and the defense is on the field the whole game. And if you look up Tiger caught in a hurricane, this would probably be the result here. Not as good of a metaphor since Georgia's Bulldogs, but Tiger versus Bulldog in real life, that one's over. We lose 34-3 as Carson Beck, I don't know, sent a message up to God directly at halftime and said, please let me throw a touchdown. Got out at halftime and started lighting up the defense. Defense got a little tired. They tear us up 34-3. Number 1 ranked team against the then 14 ranked team. So, Georgia's expected to win. As I think no Clemson fan is truly expecting to come out of this game with a win. But a close loss in week 1 against this team would be like, all right, we can recover from that. Instead, the Clemson offense can't get anything going. At least we know our new kicker can kick a field goal. That was a problem last year. And we get obliterated, and somehow, probably because of the defense in the first half, cling on to that 25th spot. Dabo's got to change for sure. Kay Klubnik is just really not the way. I didn't really believe in him when he was behind DJ, and now he's taking over for DJ, and I still do not believe in him. Granted, I don't think I'd prefer to have DJ. Neither one of these guys is really having the best time of their life right now. But Clemson gets dismantled by Georgia as Georgia, shows that they're a little human. That they can be stalled out by a good defense for a little bit. But if while you're stalling out Georgia, your offense can't also get around them, it doesn't really matter. Georgia's eventually gonna reconvene and get it back over you, and they get it back over us by 31 points.
Yeah, honestly, now that I'm thinking back about this game, like, there's not really much to say. Like, early on, it was definitely reminiscent. We were talking throughout the game, another one of our friends, we were talking throughout the game, and it's like really reminiscent of 3 years ago, one of our earlier, I want to say our first football video on the podcast, Georgia, Clemson 2021. That was like 10-3. That was the beginning of Georgia's dominance.
For the only touchdown.
Yeah, so I mean, it was like, I guess we're going to end up with one of those type of games, and then halftime came, like you said, Carson Beck, he must have prayed a whole lot. They came out and just, I don't understand how they flipped the switch that well. If they came out and they ended up, maybe scoring like a touchdown or two, and then Clemson maybe scored, and ended up being like 17-10 or something, like, all right. But they just completely flipped the switch. And one of the true times where we actually see halftime adjustments come into play. And Georgia, they look like the Georgia that we kind of knew and love. I guess if not, if you're every team in SEC outside of Bama, but that was a team that we were kind of expecting to see. So I think that was more of a wake up call. I don't want to say for Georgia because it's not like they, almost lost, but they came out slow, turned things around in the second half. They looked more like what we expected them to look. For Clemson, on one hand, it's like you don't have Deshaun Watson, you don't have Trevor Lawrence anymore. You haven't really had that great generation of QB like you used to, but it's not like the roster is complete garbage. The transfer portal thing with Dabo, I mean, he's stubborn. It seems like he's not going to change his mind. That's fine. You're going to suffer in that department, but it's not like the roster overall is trash.
Yeah.
It's like it's still a good roster. It's still Clemson. Like, you're still going to have pretty good recruiting classes. So I think they have other issues. I mean, you can talk about the play calling too. I mean, I think I've seen.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that many Clemson games, since we started school, but I think I've seen enough Clemson wide receiver screens for the rest of my life that go for either 1 or 2 yards or negative yards. I mean, how many times can you possibly do the same thing? And I just watch sample sizes of the games for them when they're on national TV. It's the same crap. Call some different plays, change your philosophy, do something. Obviously, what you're doing ain't working. And they might end up winning like 8, 9 games again anyway. But if we're expecting to see the Clemson that was winning national titles, that's done. At least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Now to move on to games that actually were pretty good and weren't complete, bore fest unless you were the team beating up on somebody. You got USC and LSU. That was a pretty good game over on Saturday night over in Vegas. This one ended up 27-20 USC. I don't even know what the heck happened with LSU in the fourth quarter. They were going into a 17-13, ended up losing 27-20. Brian Kelly obviously had a lot to say after the game. I don't like what he said about his quarterback because, look, Nussmeier and Moss, they put on a pretty good show. They were both really good in the game. Guys that eerily similar kind of careers, both started in 21, sat behind Heisman Trophy winners for 2 years, and now finally get their shot. Both came out, showed what they could do with this offense. So, yes, okay, Moss had a better game, but I just feel like that's a bad thing to come out and say, oh, their QB outplayed our QB. Or I didn't like what I saw from the sideline. You're the head coach, Brian. That is your job. What are you talking about? So, yes, I know the undisciplined plays. I mean, Lacey had, scored that touchdown, and he was shooting USC, and caused them to end up getting a pretty good return, blah, blah, blah. The undisciplined stuff, I get that, the attitude on the sidelines, but take some more accountability there, Brian. It's not the end of the world for LSU. I mean, they played a good team, played a good game. They lost. Notre Dame ended up beating Texas A&M. Probably not as much as an interesting game for offensive fans, I would say, but still good performance from Notre Dame. They came out, went into College Station against still what we should expect to be a good Texas A&M team, and got the win over there. And outside of that, you mentioned it before we started recording, not too many, great matchups. A lot of Power 4 teams now beating up on these small schools, not really impressing me at all.
Yeah, a lot of 70-0, 63-3,
Right.
What are the Alabama had the Western Kentucky quarterback was like, we're going to show them the same Western Kentucky, and they lost 63-0.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, buddy. You might be the same Western Kentucky. Next week you could try to not be, but week one ain't for small schools unless you can break through. But teams that we could think of breaking through this week are Georgia Tech and Boston College. Those are not small schools. They're just we don't expect them to be able to beat Florida State. That's a different kind of bracket kind of thing. Nothing against Western Kentucky specifically, but that's kind of what we got, right? We got Miami and Florida rivalry. We have Florida State bumbling around for 2 weeks. We have Clemson and Georgia and their little thing. USC and LSU give us a great game. Notre Dame toppling A&M is pretty big, and then otherwise it's just kind of like, well, that small school lost by 60, and they're going to feel really bad next week. So it's just not a whole lot from there.